my life, most of my career at the Daily Telegraph. I've covered politics for 2 decades and presented a podcast called Chopper's Political Podcast. Here's the plan. We've got 1 hour with each candidate. For the first half an hour, I'll be asking them questions about who they are, why they want to be your leader, their backgrounds and their record in government. The second half an hour will be over to you, when I'll put to them questions which you've submitted by dropping questions into the ballot boxes outside this hall and online. I'll make sure I'm asking them tough questions, direct questions, but not gotcha questions, as I want to get answers to help you decide who your leader should be. When the final 2 are chosen next week, it's over to you. Okay, let's go. Our first guest, our first candidate is Robert Jenrick. Okay, here we go. Robert Jenrick, why do you want to be leader?
Well, good afternoon, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. Very good to see you all. Look, I think our party has just suffered its worst ever electoral defeat. The worst since 1832. In fact, I did an event in Jacob Rees-Mogg's constituency recently, and when I said that, he said it was since 1760. And then afterwards, someone said to me in the audience, he was probably around in 1760. I hope Jacob's not in the audience today. But on a serious note, we've just suffered this terrible defeat. And I think when a party suffers a defeat like that, when it's been rejected by the electorate, you can't continue with the stale status quo that we've been on. You've got to change. I stand for change. I want to change the offer of our party to the public. I want to change the operation of our party. I believe I have a diagnosis of what has gone wrong. I believe I've set that out already, quite clearly, sometimes in the Daily Telegraph, sometimes on GB News. And I think I've got a very clear sense of where I want to take this party and where I want to take the country.
What was that moment when you thought, I can do the top job?
Well, I didn't know I was even going to hold my constituency, to be honest, until the early hours of the morning after the general election. I'm the designated survivor of Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, the only Conservative Member of Parliament. But I did feel after the election that it is incumbent upon my generation of Conservative members of Parliament to step up. And I remember the first party conference I ever went to, which was in 2005, when we had those memorable speeches by David Cameron and David Davis. And it sat right at the back of the audience as a very young Conservative. And of course I was impressed by David Cameron's no notes performance, etc., etc. But the other emotion I had was, why have we wasted 8 years waiting to get to this point? Why have we wasted 8 years to choose to change, to choose someone who could be our next Prime Minister, who will transform our party and get us back into contention? And so my very firm conviction is that someone's got to step up and lead this party, lead it back into government. And that's what I want to do.
And you've got a young family. You've got a young family. Are they ready for the scrutiny you're going to get?
Well, I've got 3 young girls, and they have all been reading the papers, watching the news. And one of them said to me the other day, does this mean we're going to get free tickets to Taylor Swift? and I said to Sophia, no, that's only for leaders of the Labour Party.
So on the series, you'll turn down freebies, will you, if you become leader?
Well, I will. I wouldn't.
All freebies.
I will do. 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 I will do.
He said, I will do, you said.
I will do. The freebies are so good, incidentally, at this conference that it's only a matter of time before Keir Starmer turns up.
I guess your daughter knew what was coming, because what's her middle name?
Oh, you're embarrassing her now. It is Margaret Thatcher. It's not, it's Thatcher. It's Thatcher. She was born the year that Margaret Thatcher died. And so, as, you know, I respect strong women. In fact, everyone is female in my house. I've got 3 daughters, my wife, and 2 dogs, which are both female. But I thought it was a good way of reminding her of a great Prime Minister.
Do you see yourself as a left or right-wing politician?
Well, people speak of me as on the right of the party. But I actually don't think that characterization, those labels, are very accurate of anyone, frankly. I think they're a bit tired. What I'm interested in politics is the common ground. I don't believe in the centre ground of politics. The centre ground is just equidistant between left and right, splitting the difference. It's trying to find unhappy consensus. I want to find the centre ground. And the issues that I have campaigned on, certainly very prominently in the last year or so, like immigration, crime, extremism, defence, I would argue that these are not left or right. These are issues that millions of our fellow countrymen and women care about. And this is exactly what the Conservative Party should stand for.
Okay. You decided to become challenge leader the morning after the election. You weren't plotting to do it after you resigned, were you, in last year?
No, I wasn't. I mean, the decision to resign was a very sad one to me. I was a good friend of the Prime Minister, Rishi, and it's never easy to walk away in that sense. But I did feel it was the right thing to do. I felt very strongly about it. And that was because I didn't want to be just another minister who makes and breaks promises. And I felt that if I'd gone along with the Rwanda bill, as it was at the time, I would have had to look my colleagues in Parliament in the eye, and all of you, the members of this party, and tell you that black was white. I'd have to tell you, we're going to stop the boats, when I knew it wasn't going to happen. That this was a good bill, when I knew it was a bad bill. And that was wrong for me as an individual, wrong for our party, and wrong for our country. So I thought it was important to take a stand. And I don't want our party to keep making and breaking promises on things that matter so much to this country. That is immensely damaging to this party and immensely damaging to trust in politics more generally.
Why not stay and fight to make Rwanda work?
Well, look,
you basically legged it when you could have stayed on the field of play.
No, Chris, that is completely, I fundamentally reject that. I spent a year in the Home Office. I found it really in ashes. In my tenure, I fought relentlessly for the biggest change to our legal migration system in my lifetime. It will reduce the number of people coming into our country legally by 300,000 every year. I also got the number of people being deported from our country up 80%. And I argued relentlessly, mostly in private, occasionally in the chamber and on the media, that we had to stop the boats, that we had to have the strengthened version of the Rwanda policy that I knew we needed. Ultimately, I'm afraid to say, the government, the Prime Minister, the Cabinet were not willing to do that. I got the support of 60 colleagues, as you know, and I tried to set this out in the House of Commons to change the law so that we would take the European Convention of Human Rights out of our ability to handle illegal migration. If we had done that, I am certain we would have got flights off to Rwanda. I cannot predict what that would have meant for the general election, but I think I can confidently say it would have been a hell of a lot better than it was.
But by leaving early, but by resigning, you contributed to the defeat in July because you made like a party that wasn't going to deliver on the key plank of its policies.
I don't accept that. I think that in politics, you have to be a team player. And look, I think I'm the only person in this leadership election who has served in the government of each of our last 5 Conservative Prime Ministers. And I think we can all accept they were quite a varied group of people. So I got along with people. I was always the person on the media. You know, I did the COVID press conferences. I was doing morning round after morning round, defending colleagues, defending the party. I was known as someone who was immensely loyal to the party, and I remained so. You know, I've been a member of this party since I was 16 years of age. I joined just after 1997. But I do think, and the longer I've served in politics, the more strongly I felt this, you have to take a stand sometimes. If you think something is in the national interest, you've got to take a stand for it. And that was my view. I came to the conviction that illegal migration was doing immense harm to our country. Not everybody sees that. It's not their, it's not their local hotel that's been taken over by illegal migrants. It's not their kids who are being knocked off a social housing waiting list. They don't live in the parts of our country where are the community cohesion problems. But I saw those places, and I don't want that to be the country that my children and grandchildren grow up in.
And just finally on Rwanda, if you become leader, maybe Prime Minister, would you reenact the version of it?
Look, I would do, because I believe you have to have a deterrent. Thank you. Thank you. Look, I worked very hard to do all the other things you need to do. I mean, you and I talked about this at the time. I travelled around Europe. I did diplomacy. I went to North Africa. I signed the Albania deal. I worked with the National Crime Agency, the Security Service. You name it. It isn't enough. You have to inject a deterrent into the system. But there is one further thing you've got to do if you care about securing our borders, and that is you do have to leave the European Convention on Human Rights.
You say that, and the members applause, but is that realistic? More in common polling finds that 2 to 1 of the public don't want it to happen. It's basically the reddest of red herrings, to quote Robert Buckland. I mean, why are you doing it when you want an election appeal to the wider country?
Well, sometimes you've got to do tough things. You know, look, my analysis of why we lost this election was not the tactical mistakes during the campaign, although some of them were very poor. It was the fact we didn't deliver for the British public. We made big promises and didn't keep them. And if we are lucky enough to get back into government in the future, I never want to let down the British public again. If we are given a second chance, we won't be given a third chance. So a party like ours has to stand for ending illegal migration. And the only way to do that is to get rid of this arsenal of laws that are used by illegal migrants to frustrate their removal from our country. You can't ignore the European Court. We're a common law nation. You can't reform the court. It has 46 member states, from Iceland to Hungary to Andorra, you name it. It requires unanimity to do so. It's a fantasy. It is, in essence, leave or remain. I'm for leave.
You said in a video yesterday that our special forces are killing rather than capturing terrorists because lawyers will set them free under the European Court. Do you really mean that, do you?
I do. You know, look, our very respected former colleague, Ben Wallace, one of the best defence secretaries in modern times, used his first intervention after leaving office to make almost this very point. He said that he would think it was difficult for the UK, our armed forces, to conduct a similar operation to the one that the United States did to kill or capture Osama bin Laden. That's wrong. I don't want our human rights apparatus to be standing in the way of taking the right operational decisions for our national security and for protecting the lives of the brave men and women who serve in our special forces.
Moving on to legal migration, you promised to cut it in 2015, 2017, 2019, 2024 when you stood as a Tory candidate. You didn't do it. Why didn't you? You were in government.
Well, I did when I was the minister responsible for it.
Were you fighting internally for it?
Look, I think everybody knows I fought pretty darn hard to get the changes. Without lifting the veil entirely on what happened, the reason that we got the changes was because I sat in the Prime Minister's office late at night and said to him, I'm not going to continue in this government unless we do this, because it was so important to me. And I'll tell you why. In the 25 years prior to Tony Blair becoming our Prime Minister in 1997, net migration to our country was 69,000. In the 25 years afterwards, including much of the time we were in office, it was 5.9 million. That has put immense pressure on housing, on public services. It's undercut the wages of British workers, and it has made our country less united. You can't successfully integrate 1.2 million people a year into a country as small as ours. Something has to give. So what I want us to do is to return to the historic norm. Let's get net migration down.
To what?
I would do the tens of thousands or fewer.
So thousands?
Thousands. And the key thing here is you have to have a cap. Because David Cameron promised this. No one believes us right now. What I've argued for consistently is that Parliament sets a cap. And that is cast in iron. So that I can look you in the eyes and you can go out of this hall and look your friends, your neighbours, your constituents in the eyes and say with certainty that we mean it and we're going to do it this time. That is the only way we will rebuild trust and confidence on this issue.
Moving on to tax, are you happy with record tax levels since the Second World War?
Look, I am not happy with it.
Are you embarrassed about it?
I think it is very sad that we had a Conservative government for 14 years and it has left the tax burden the highest it's ever been. Now, what do you do about that is the real answer, isn't it? Because we're all united, I think, in that sentiment. I believe in the dynamic effect of taxes. When I persuaded Rishi to cut stamp duty during the pandemic, it led to the highest number of transactions in our housing market in a single year. And the Treasury got money from all manner of things, tradespeople, you name it, prospered. So it can be done. But it is the easiest thing in politics to pick your least favourite tax and say you're going to cut it. The way that great reforms have happened in the past, like in the 1980s, is by economic reforms, supply-side reforms. And so what I've consistently argued for in government, as Housing Secretary, for example, and since leaving government, is that we need to be reformers again. We need to harness the energy of those great Conservative ministers of the 1980s and get Britain building, change our energy policy, because it's one that is not working right now, and Ed Miliband's about to make it much worse. Get people off welfare and into work. Give our children real skills, not just low-value degrees.
Rates. Would you cut the top rate of tax, like Liz Truss wanted to do?
No, I would like to do that. I don't think it would be sensible for me to, make up our fiscal policy right now, because actually one of the big tasks for me, or whoever leads this party, beginning in November, is to restore our economic credibility. So I will have to work extremely hard to restore that, because let's be honest with ourselves, we did lose some of that economic credibility in recent years, particularly around the mini-budget. And so I want us to seem sober, competent, professional, for our party to once again be the guardians of your savings, your pensions, your small business. That is what people expect of our party.
Okay. Just on your judgment, your character, you've taken £75,000 from a company that's got loans from a British Virgin Islands company. Is that a good, are you defending that today? That was emerged overnight. Back in 2020, you got into a tangle over a positive development when you were the housing secretary. Some would say that, you know, is your compass going the right way all the time? You're getting into a bit of scrapes here involving money.
I don't think so. I mean, it's a fact of politics that our political parties are financed by donations. I would love to broaden the base of our party, as you know, and get more members in, but you have to accept donations from individuals and from companies, and that donation is from a, you know, pretty standard British business that's
with no employees, though, apparently.
It's involved in the fitness industry, and the guy who runs it has come out and explained exactly why he wants to support me.
Okay. In terms of Labour, how are you going to beat them? I mean, who's your real enemy here? Do you try and tack to the right towards reform, or to maybe to the centre ground where the Lib Dems are?
I don't agree with that analysis. I don't think you have to pick a lane. What I want to do is win back the millions of voters we lost to reform and the millions of voters we lost to the Labour Party and the Lib Dems. If you look at the electorate today, whether they're reform voters, Labour voters, Lib Dem voters, you name it, in all four nations of the United Kingdom, the three issues that they talk of time and again are immigration, the economy, and the NHS. Now, I wrote an article, not for the Telegraph, I'm afraid, in the early hours after the general election for the Times, in which I said the reason we lost the election is because we failed to deliver on those three things. That analysis remains as true today as it was then. People order them differently, but those are the three big issues. So our party needs to be obsessed with how we can reform the NHS. Don't treat it like a religion to be worshipped. Treat it like a public service to be reformed. Don't just think about the inputs, boasting about how much money you're putting in. Think about the outputs and the experience of patients. On the economy. On the economy, reclaim the mantle of low tax and pro-growth, which, if we're honest with ourselves, we have lost a bit in recent years, and come forward with a proper plan as to how we get growth going, real growth growing again in this country, and in all parts of the country, incidentally, because whether Disraeli called it one nation or Boris called it levelling up, I want everyone to have opportunity. I'm a lad who grew up 10 miles down the road in Wolverhampton. I represent a small town in North Nottinghamshire. I believe in that vision of conservatism. And then on immigration, you know where I stand. Secure our borders, reduce legal migration. I think if we do those three things, we'll have a good chance of getting people back home to us.
And the Nigel Farage question, your predecessor, Rishi Sunak, said you're a broad church, suggesting he could be a Tory again. Is that possible under your leadership?
Well, I don't think the party could afford the bar bill if we invited Nigel Farage back in. On a serious note, my view of reform is this. I think it's a symptom, not a cause. It exists in its current state because we failed. And by that I don't mean you, the members of the party. I mean we in Westminster. We made promises, we didn't keep them. So I'm not going to disparage reform. I think in a way that's denigrating the millions of people who vote for them, who are our people. What I am going to do is set out, with your support, to make them redundant, to retire Nigel Farage. And I think you do that by being crystal clear on where we stand on the issues that we have lost trust on. Legal migration, illegal migration, integration, extremism, policing. If we can do that, then we make our party what it was when I was growing up. The natural home for every small C Conservative, the length and breadth of our country. Let's do that. Let's do that.
Well, what job would you give Boris Johnson in your new team?
Oh. Hard question. Well, I haven't read his book yet, so I want to wait and see what he said about me before answering that question. But you have actually asked me that question once before, or something similar, and I think I said this to you. The Conservative Party is in a hole right now. We need to get all of our best players on the pitch. Now, people can do that in many different ways. In Parliament, out of Parliament, campaigning, advising. So if I was lucky enough to lead this party, Boris, Penny Mordaunt, Andy Street, you name it. Let's get the Conservative family back together. Let's get back in business again.
And reforming the party, would you give these people an elected chair, I should say? There's been 6 in the past 5 years, I think.
Well, I'm open to that idea. I don't want to set up the new Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner frisson. So I think we'd have to think through carefully. But my general attitude to reforming the party is I want to return the party to the service of the members. I want you to feel respected again. I want to end the era of emails, demanding money, not asking you what do you actually want from this party. I want to end the time. And I give this vow to you all today. I will never parachute in the favoured sons and daughters of the leader's office into supposedly safe seats in our country. Never again. Never again.
The next election could be a Brexit election again, if we go towards more alignment with the European Union. How did you vote again in the referendum?
I voted Remain.
Was that a mistake?
I wouldn't do it with hindsight, no. And let me explain why. I was someone who was finely balanced on the issue. I was concerned, and I think in this respect my concern was borne out, as to whether the British state would actually be able to harness the opportunities, and that we might end up in a situation where we had incurred the inevitable disruption that comes with an immense constitutional and economic change without taking full advantage of it. In a sense, I think that is what's happened, because we have failed as a government and a country to take a full advantage of all of the opportunities that we could have done. Whether that is in the technologies of the future, like life sciences and technology and financial services, or in our immigration system. When I arrived in the Home Office, my generation of politicians was the first, post-freedom of movement, to have the levers of our migration system fully in our hands. And yet we had used them to create a system even more liberal than the one we had in the EU. And I felt that that was like us sticking 2 fingers up to the British public.
Do you want to say sorry for that now?
Well, I didn't take those decisions, Chris. But
your government did.
On behalf of the Conservative Party, I think that was a disgraceful decision and one of the worst public policy failures in recent years. And I set out over the course of the months and year that followed to change it. And we have. We've got ourselves back on a better course. But just reducing net migration from 750,000 to 300,000, that is not enough. You know we've got to bring it further down than that. So I want the next Conservative government to actually seize the opportunities of Brexit and make this country the most nimble and innovative and entrepreneurial country we possibly can. I believe that's possible.
In the so-called culture wars, do you value freedom of speech?
Absolutely. And I think freedom of speech is in danger in this country and throughout the West right now. It's something that our party has to stand for. Incidentally, it's one of the reasons why I want to draft a British Bill of Rights to replace the European Convention of Human Rights, because I think that we could create something that is better, that is more modern, and that enshrines conservative rights like freedom of religion, freedom of speech, property rights in a way that it doesn't today.
Why does the left have a problem with our history, our country's history?
Well, I think that they feel ashamed of our country and our identity. I wrote in the Mail recently that this is particularly prevalent of English identity, because it's perfectly normal for a Scottish or a Welsh politician to say that they are proudly British, but also a Scotsman or a Welshman or woman. But it's very rare for an English politician to say the same. And in fact, I think I went on Sky News afterwards, and they said, well, define English identity, sort of mockingly, like I needed to say, well, it's Sunday roast and, the view from, Tower Bridge or something like that. Well, of course, we all have our own definition of what we love about our country, but you would never say that to a Frenchman or an Italian or a Spaniard, would you? And so I don't think we should be ashamed of our identities. They're not related to faith or ethnicity, but they are the identity that binds us together. And they're under threat right now because our institutions have been taken over by liberal and left-leaning people who have a dogmatic opposition to our identity.
On your watch as a government?
On a conservative watch. And because mass migration has meant that there are too many people coming into our country to properly integrate into the sense of national togetherness that I want to build.
Okay.
And incidentally, you say on my watch, and of course I have to take responsibility like everyone else, but where I did have opportunities to fight this, I did. So if you remember those mobs taking down statues, like Edward Colston in Bristol, well, a couple of weeks later, as Housing Secretary, I changed the law so that it was immensely difficult to ever take down historic statues. And has any statue been taken down since then? Not as far as I'm aware. So I always take opportunities to stand up for these things.
Just some quick yes-no questions before we move on to the members' questions. Will you restore the winter fuel payment to pensioners?
Yes.
Will you restore hereditary peers to the House of Lords?
Oh, well, I like hereditary peers, but probably not. I think that, that isn't quite our new modern Conservative Party, but I feel sad when traditions get lost like that.
Will you scrap Labour's ban on grammar schools?
Absolutely. I went to Wolverhampton Grammar School. My constituents go to grammar schools. I want to expand grammar schools. I want to create new grammar schools. I created a free school in my constituency, which would have been a grammar school if we'd been allowed to do it. Let's get on and do that.
Amazing the government didn't do it in 14 years of power. Would you abolish the top rate of income tax?
It wouldn't be the number one priority for tax cuts.
And how would you reform the BBC licence fee, which is an issue for so many members, it seems?
Well, I'm sorely tempted to say that I would scrap it, but look, I have 3 young daughters. They watch so little terrestrial TV. They're on YouTube, on their tablets, their iPads. I think it's difficult to see the long-term future for the licence fee, but that's the question we'll have to give a lot of thought to. Okay,
and just finally, some very quick ones on a lighter note. Donald Trump or Kamala Harris?
Oh, you've got me into trouble by asking me questions like this once before. Look, I am a Conservative. The Conservative Party has long-standing links with the Republican Party. It is natural that we lean towards the Republican Party and support their candidates, but I have respect for Kamala Harris, and I would work productively and constructively with whoever is the next President of the United States.
Boris Johnson or David Cameron?
Can I tell you a story about this?
No, you answered the question.
Fair dues. I have respect for both of them, to be honest. I was going to tell you a quick story, which that when I was first elected in a by-election, which many of you, thank you, came to help me in, I took them both out campaigning, and it was, I think, virtually the only time they went out campaigning together. And we went to a market stall, and they each bought each other biscuits, or sort of cakes, on a market stall. And it was very telling about their relationship. Boris bought Cameron a giant jammy Dodger. Cameron then bought Boris a rocky road. You learned a lot from that.
That's a good story. At home, do you rather mow the lawn or hoover?
Oh, I do mow the lawn. I find that very therapeutic, actually.
Okay. Do you prefer a second donut or the Ozempic dieting drug?
It's only a matter of time before you go and ask me that question. Definitely a donut. Yes. That's why I needed the Ozempic.
Which of your parliamentary... Which of your colleagues in Parliament would be best on the traitors?
Well, Michael Gove has left Parliament now, hasn't he?
And just finally, just for me, will you recommission a new Royal Yacht Britannia if you become the next Prime Minister?
Oh, well, I delivered on the Brexit coin for you.
Yes.
I saved the penny for you. I delivered 6 million custard cream biscuits for you in our shielding boxes.
It's not all for me, this, but yeah.
Well, these are your pet projects, Chris. I would love to see that. I think it has to be funded by, someone other than the taxpayer, but it would give me huge pride to see that once again.
Thank you, everybody. Right, moving on. Thank you for your questions overnight and those submitted into the ballot boxes, and here are some of them that I've selected from those you entered. Most of the past, from Damien from London, if Damien's here, most of the past Tory administrations talked right and governed left and were not competent, and half the votes cast in 2019 were lost. How would you be different to that?
Very good question. Well, I always lived in hope that we could have a Conservative leader who was both right-wing and competent. That's what I would aspire to be. Let's be true Conservatives, do things which are conservative, but be professional and competent. That's not too much to ask for, is it? I think that's what you all want. I think that's what you want.
Stephen from the East Midlands, he asked, how do you propose to bring together the two wings of the party, given you're from the right?
Well, as I say, I've been served in the government of each of the last 5 prime ministers. I am very gratified by the fact that so far, and it's a long way to go, in the polls, the votes of MPs in Parliament, I've got the most of the candidates. And of the people supporting me, there's a very broad spectrum from, what might, as I say, crudely be described as the right and the left. So I want to bring the whole parliamentary party...
Who's your biggest left-wing backer in the MPs?
Oh, I have many. I see Victoria Atkins is there, down there. Hello, Victoria, my friend from Lincolnshire.
Okay.
So there's a lot of people from across the party who are coming together. It's obviously now the duty of the next leader to unite the party. There's only 121 Conservative MPs. There were more people in my 6th form at school than there are in the Conservative Parliamentary Party right now. So the era of 5 families, 1 nation, the end, full stop. It is one Conservative team from now on.
Stephen from Bristol says we have a pretty good idea, or he seems to have one, of what's in the Labour budget at the end of October. If you were leader and you had to respond to it, what would you say?
Look, I think that Rachel Reeves is a very unimaginative chancellor. I take her at her word that she wants to grow our economy. But if that's her objective, she's going about it in completely the wrong way. Every one of her policies is going to stymie growth in this country. And what we need above anything else right now is some economic growth. We, the Conservative Party, are at our best when we are the trade union for the working people of this country. So we should be fighting for them. And that means fighting for those 10 million pensioners who've had their winter fuel payment taken off them. It means fighting for the small business person who wants to pass on their small business without the inheritance tax that's being trailed. The small family farmer who always thought they could hand their farm to their children or grandchildren and now are worried and having to pay for tax advice because they think they might get clobbered by the tax man. The investors who are fleeing en masse from our country because they think that CGT might be increased. You know, the pubs who think they can't even have a smoker in a beer garden anymore. We have to be standing up and socking it to Rachel Reeves at that budget. And frankly, Chris, sorry to our friends at CCHQ here, what a bad decision that the next leader of this party isn't the one at the dispatch box doing that, taking it to Rachel Reeves, standing up for our party.
Well, In that vein, if you're the final two next Wednesday evening, will you go and meet with the chairman, Richard Fuller, on the Thursday morning with your opponent and demand to end it early?
100%.
Okay, there we are. So William from Edinburgh is asking about planning. He says we need more planning, more housing in this country. The main roadblock is NIMBYs. This party relies on votes who want to stop development broadly, he thinks. How can you be a party of house building, and how can you get more building on our green and pleasant land? Are you a banana, first of all, I should ask?
I'm not a banana. I'm not a banana. I mean, I am someone who loves the countryside. I'm somebody who represents an historic town, and I appreciate the concerns of people across our country to protect and conserve what's good about this country. I also believe that we've got to get more homes built. This is the party of Harold Macmillan, of Margaret Thatcher. We are the party of home ownership. What a crime it would be if we allow that mantle to be seized by Angela Rayner. Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer. We've got to get it back. And that means that we have to find a way to reform the broken system that is holding back the homes from being built. Now, you can do that in a smarter way. I want to do that by densifying our big cities, by doing regeneration, like Andy Street, incidentally, did so well here in Birmingham and the West Midlands. I want to do it. I want to ensure that infrastructure accompanies those homes. And I also want those homes to be beautiful. And you might remember that I worked with the late great conservative philosopher Roger Scruton. And we created the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission. And that came from a very simple belief that it must be possible in a country as creative and imaginative as ours to build homes that are actually popular, that are in keeping with our history and vernacular, and add to the sum total of life and architecture and human satisfaction in our country. That is an unfinished revolution. It's barely been begun. I want that to go forward.
What do you say to NIMBYs? What do you say to them if they're refusing to have any building in green fields?
I understand the emotional argument behind that. You know, an Englishman's home is their castle. We all love our homes. But I think that has to be balanced against the absolute moral and political imperative of getting young people onto the housing ladder. You know the statistics. At the last election, the average age at which somebody turned Conservative was 63. That was up from 39 at the prior election. There's even a terrifying statistic that 1 in 6 of our voters won't be alive at the next election. And nobody in this hall, I hasten to add. I have quoted that at some events across the country, and I've begun to lose my audience at that point. But it's an existential battle for our party. We've got to get this right. We've got to get Britain building again.
Okay. Hassan from Slough asks, if and when the Tories win the next election, will you reverse Labour's attack on families by taking away the VAT rate on private schools?
I would, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I'll tell you a little personal story about that. I grew up to two people from a working class background. Money was quite tight in our household. My mum and Dad had quit their job and set up a small business, and it didn't prosper initially. I went to a state primary school, and my granddad died, and my grandmother, who was not a wealthy person herself, decided instead of going on a cruise or doing anything else you might do with some money, to spend that money putting my sister and I through a private school. It wasn't Eton, it was Wolverhampton Grammar School. Although my Labour opponent once described it as the Eton of Wolverhampton, which was a bit far-fetched, I have to say. It's a good school, but it was a bit far-fetched. But to me, that is an innately conservative story. And we should never bow to the politics of envy. We should respect people who make decisions like that.
On energy, Richard from Warwickshire asks, Ed Miliband is not issuing any new drilling licenses in the North Sea. Would you reverse that to meet the UK's energy needs in a hostile world?
Absolutely. I think that's a crazy decision. He has compromised 200,000 jobs in our oil and gas industry, the length and breadth of the country, particularly in the northeast of Scotland. I want us to have a fundamentally different energy policy which prioritises cheap and reliable energy in this country. That means investing in new nuclear. It means saying that gas is here to stay for the foreseeable future. And it means saying yes to net zero in principle, but no, never to achieving it on the backs of working people and deindustrialising our country.
Ishfaq from Peterborough says, the words of a leader can unite or divide us. As a British-born Muslim, I am fed up of being made to feel like the other. The last government, your government, failed to produce a working definition of Islamophobia, and the recent riots only added to the pressure and unease on British Muslims. How will you unite us?
Well, a very good question. Well, with great respect to Ishfaq, I don't support creating a definition of Islamophobia. I gave that a great deal of thought when I was community secretary and concluded that there was not a satisfactory way to do that that maintained freedom of speech in our country. And I appreciate that others may take a different view, and the Labour Party say that they're going to create one, maybe even legislate for it. But that's not something that I would advocate. That does not mean, of course, that we must fight racism and Islamophobia wherever we come across it, and I will always do that. I think it's incredibly important that we build a united and cohesive country where everyone can feel that they have a home. And there is a really important role for the leader of our country, particularly a Prime Minister, to have a unifying voice on these issues. And that was why I felt that Keir Starmer had so failed to meet the moment when we had those riots earlier in the year, that he was so quick to call out the thuggery and the violence from the far right, which was completely disgraceful, but so slow, so squeamish, so selective to call it out when there were sectarian gangs on the streets of some of our cities, including, on one occasion, here in Birmingham. You should call out violence and thuggery. You should call out racism and extremism wherever you see it.
So you're saying there was two-tier policing in the summer?
I think the police certainly gave the appearance of two-tier policing, and that's very concerning. I worry that the police, at times, are too concerned about community relations than enforcing the law without fear or favour. And I think there is also a problem in this country. But more than the police, I think there is two-tier politics, where some of our political leaders are so afraid to confront these issues that they are silent on them. I am not going to do that. You know I will take a stand on these issues. I've done it time and again. I'm one of the handful of members of the House of Commons who speak about things like Islamist extremism. I think that's really important. You've got to choose your language carefully. You've got to try to persuade rather than needlessly provoke when you address these complex and sensitive issues. But you've got to address them. You've got to speak up for the silent majority in our country whose voices deserve to be heard.
Language matters. You say it there. Unity matters. But you said, didn't you, about the issue of the police response after those riots, that someone shouting Allah Akbar on the streets of London should be arrested immediately. I mean, how is that reassuring to Ishfaq in Peterborough?
Well, I think if you shout Allah Akbar in an intimidating manner, and of course, context is everything, clearly not if one is doing it as millions of British Muslims and Muslims all over the world do in a peaceful manner every day, a prayerful manner. But if you shout it in an intimidatory manner, then it's right that action is taken. And that is what the law says. The law gives the police the ability to take action. And whether it's that or scenes like we saw over the course of the last year, someone shouting jihad off Oxford Street, and the police putting out a tweet saying that it was perfectly okay. Someone projecting a genocidal chant onto Big Ben and nothing really happening about it. People praising the Houthis on the streets of London when they were firing missiles at British-flagged vessels. That is wrong. That is wrong. That is not the country I want to live in.
Fewer than a quarter of your colleagues in Parliament are women in the House of Commons. Is it now the time, asked Jane from Stratford-upon-Avon, to bring back, to think the unthinkable, bring back women-only shortlists?
No. No, it's not. And I say that, I'll tell you why. I think it is wrong, it is a stain on our party that we've actually gone backwards in the number of female members of Parliament. I didn't think that was possible. I thought that we would be on a slow but inexorable process of reaching parity.
Which Labour are on.
Which Labour are on. So we've got to change that. And in fact, it's not just MPs. We in Westminster always reach for the example of members of Parliament. I want to see more female Conservative councillors. I want to see more female association officers. I want to see all of those brilliant women who are involved in our party feeling that they are sufficiently valued to step up and take positions within our party. I don't think that we do this in the way the left would do it, by having all women shortlists. We believe in meritocracy. I think we're doing a massive disservice to the very, very talented women in our party if we say, well, or even allow the suggestion to arise that the only reason they got there was because we'd sort of made the system work in their favour. What you certainly want is a leader who prioritises this issue, who makes it a personal priority, and at every turn helps to support female candidates, to urge them on, and to urge associations to select the obviously extremely talented women that we have who deserve to be selected, deserve to be members of Parliament.
Sam from Yorkshire asks, what's your approach to complex moral issues, in particular the upcoming vote on assisted suicide?
Well, this is obviously a matter of conscience, and if I was leader, it would remain so, and so every Conservative member of Parliament would come to their own conclusion. Today, my thinking is this. I would vote against assisted dying. I've thought about it quite carefully. It is personal to me. My own grandmother lived with me. It was one of the most formative experiences of my childhood. She had a very long and terminal illness, a very severe form of emphysema, and the last years of her life were extremely difficult and painful, and it was painful for us to watch. Now, we never had a conversation, obviously, about what she might have done if we'd lived in a different society with different laws, but I understand where the motivation to change the law comes from. And it's a noble one in that sense. But I am very concerned about the unintended consequences of changing the law. And a few months ago, just before the general election, I went to Canada to meet the Canadian Conservative Party, who I take great inspiration from. I think, incidentally, are the model, really, for what we should be doing as a party. But one of the things that, just in conversation, they spoke about was the very severe unintended consequences that they have experienced from their own changes in the law. And so I would just urge everyone, my parliamentary colleagues, Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, to think this through very, very carefully. Don't rush into this, because I don't want to be living in a country where there are elderly people. In fact, in Canada, there are quite young people who have been pushed into something which is unnecessary and is deeply regrettable. So I am inclined to vote against, but it's entirely up to other Conservative members of Parliament to reach their own conclusions.
Abortion, any reform to those laws, or you're content with where we are?
Well, I've always voted in Parliament to protect and preserve a woman's right to choose, but I don't think the law should be changed further. And just before the general election, there were suggestions to make changes, for example, to decriminalise it altogether, I think that's a mistake. And I would have voted against it then, and I would vote against that again if it comes forward in the future.
Thank you. Okay. Gordon from London says all 4 of the candidates to be leader voted 3 times for Theresa May's disastrous Brexit deal. Why should members who voted for Brexit believe you will defend and pursue the country's sovereignty?
Well, I resigned from Cabinet because I felt our Parliament should be sovereign and we should secure our borders. Nobody else did that in the last Parliament, did they? I'm the only Cabinet Minister to do that. But I'd also say, is Brexit safe in my hands? Well, David Frost, Bill Cash, John Wedgwood, Mark Francois, I could go on. Most of the people who fought most vociferously for Brexit are supporting me, have faith in me, and I hope that gives the membership of this party confidence that I believe in this project. I want it to continue. I want it to be the success that it is not yet. And I'll hold Keir Starmer to account relentlessly if he tries to water it down.
On foreign affairs, John from Bromsgrove says that assuming both Russia and China are existential threats, then should we stop trading with these 2 countries with immediate effect and ban all nationals from those countries from coming here?
Well, I've been sanctioned by Russia, so not yet by China. I've been sanctioned by Iran. So I haven't got all 3 like Tom Tugendhat, but I'm on my way there. And that's a bit of a badge of honour. Yeah. But look, no, I think it is absolutely correct that we live in an age of authoritarian states, and we've got to take that seriously. I don't think we have. I think we've been naive about it. I fought particularly on the question of Iran relentlessly to prescribe the IRGC, and successive foreign offices and prime ministers ultimately chose not to do that. I thought that was a mistake. I think we've got to have a much tougher, more clear-eyed, more realistic attitude to these threats. And I do think with China, I think it is very likely that China is going to invade Taiwan in the next 10 to 15 years. And the impact of that on our country would be immense. People think Taiwan's a long way away. It's not. It is next door to us, because the impact on our economy, our way of life, would be of a scale that dwarfs the war in Ukraine. So this is on all of us. And we want to be working with our partners like the United States and others to prepare for this. I think we should be spending 3% of our GDP on defence. And because... Here I do differ with some of the other candidates. I'm a fiscal conservative. The easiest thing in the world is to say that to you and to get a round of applause. The hardest thing is to say, where does that money come from? And so I have said time and again, I would take that money from our international aid budget and I would spend it on our armed forces. Because I think that is the best way that our country can live up to its role in the world and do what ultimately government is supposed to do: keep the British people safe.
Okay. William from Scotland says, should we be being a better friend to the political representatives of the Palestinians or the Israelis? And if so, why?
Well, look, I think it's incredibly sad what's happening in the Middle East right now. We all want to see peace in that region and for the hostilities to come to an end as soon as possible. I've travelled around the region many, many times over the years and want to see Israelis and Palestinians living in peace and harmony together, both living in their own states. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. I would love to think that there was a world in which there was a Palestinian state that was as democratic, as liberal, and as free as Israel. That's some way off, as we both know. I do think in this moment we should stand with Israel. We should stand with Israel and its ability. I think we should have, we should think to ourselves, how would we feel if 1,200 men, women, children were murdered? If our fellow citizens were raped? If it was Glastonbury, not the Nova Music Festival? If we had on our doorstep terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah? We've got to stand with Israel, acknowledge their right to defend themselves, be critical friends to Israel. So always urge them to be proportionate, to obey international law and international humanitarian law, to make the right strategic decisions for their own interest as well as those of their neighbours. But we should be standing with them. And you know my view, I'll always do that.
And just the hoodie, the Hamas or terrorist hoodie, what was that about?
Is Kay Burley in the audience here today? No. Kay Burley said I was inciting people by doing that. I mean, I don't know why we should be worried about inciting Hamas supporters. They should be arrested. Yeah. Look, I think it's perfectly... I think that is the law. That is not a controversial statement. That is the law. And I will always uphold that. Throughout my time in Parliament, I campaigned to get Hamas fully prescribed. I campaigned to get Hezbollah fully prescribed. And I'm campaigning now to get the IRGC fully prescribed. We should have zero tolerance on terrorism and extremism.
You mentioned the Ukraine war. William from Scotland says that he understands the need to deter aggression, but he's concerned about the escalating war and we're being dragged towards it, and the cost may not be worth it.
Well, I understand where that perspective comes from, and we have to take decisions, for example, the use of particular weapons, very carefully, in a highly calibrated manner, working in concert with our international allies like the United States and through NATO. But we can't allow Vladimir Putin to win. This is Europe. This is about the defense of Europe. And we should be standing with Ukraine. I think it matters to all of us. And the way in which the United Kingdom has conducted itself, the fact that our party led Europe in the defense of Ukraine should be a source of great pride to all of us. It's one of the great achievements of Boris Johnson. It's one of the achievements of the last Parliament. We should be willing to say that. I was the first member of Parliament to have a Ukrainian family come and stay with me, and they lived with us for a long time before choosing to go back home. I learned a lot from them about the experiences in Ukraine, and it made me feel very strongly these are our European friends and neighbours. We should be standing with them in their darkest hour.
John Davis from Huntingdon, a late question here. Do you support capping child allowance at 2 children? Child benefit allowance.
I would leave the policy where it is. Yeah. I think that's the right approach. I understand the argument that is made against it, and I have 3 kids myself. I support family life. We have a demographic crisis as a country. But I also think that it's a very expensive change, and there are millions of hard-working people in our country who want to see that the benefit system is fair. Fair to them, the people who are going out early in the morning, trying to put food on the table, look after their families. And we've got to have the right balance in the benefit system.
Sally Stubbs from Warwick and Leamington in West Midlands, who may be here, says, given the press will dig into everything if you become leader, Robert Jenrick, do you have any skeletons in your cupboard you can fess up to now?
Well, I'm not sure I'd do it in front of 4,000 people, but I don't think so. I don't think so.
And just very finally here from Zachary from Leicester. Do you like football?
I'm a Wolves fan.
Wolves fan.
Ooh, I've lost the audience. No. There must be some Wolves fans. This is West Midlands.
Okay. We'll take it there. That's Robert Jenrick. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Please don't go anywhere. We're going straight into our next candidate in our in this Meet Our Candidates special. So please settle down and don't go anywhere. Our next and final guest to be your leader is James Cleverly. Just here. There we go. Okay. How are you doing? All right?
Yeah, very good.
Good. Okay. James Cleverly, you're one of the 4 candidates to be leader of these people's party. What was the point when you were looking in the mirror, maybe dealing with your beard, and thought, there looks, like he could be leader, that guy, looking back at me?
Well, the real tipping point was when we had the disastrous result. I realised that a defeat of that magnitude forces us all to reconsider everything that we had decided up until that point. And I recognised that there was an opportunity for us to get things right, to head in the right direction, limit this Labour government and get back into office at the next possible opportunity. Or, if we made the wrong choice, perhaps chose the wrong leader, we could find ourselves in opposition for a very long time, perhaps indefinitely. And I have no intention of allowing the great party that I love and has given me so much in my career to slip below the waves. That was the point I realised I had to do something, serve the party, serve the country, run for leader.
I mean, do you need the hassle? You've been Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, Party Chairman. You've done all these big jobs.
Yeah, look, and for some people, this might be the most impressive job title they're ever going to get. That's not the case for me. But we don't put ourselves forward for jobs like this because it's easy. We put ourselves forward for jobs like this because there are jobs that need doing. This government needs to be held to account. We need to eject it at the first possible opportunity, and we need to set about repairing the damage that they're doing to our country. So if I wanted an easy life, no, I would not be putting myself forward. But it's not about doing what is easy, it is about doing what is necessary and about doing what is right.
And what makes you think you're better than the other 3 candidates?
Well, look, all the candidates are great. Every single one of them is not only a colleague, but a friend. And I know I'm doing myself probably a disservice by saying that I admire them all and like them all. But I am the only one who has run a great office of state. In fact, I'm the only one that has run 2 great offices of state and delivered in both of them. I'm the only one who has been chairman of the Conservative Party. I'm the only one who's been instrumental in winning a general election. I'm the only one who has the experience to deal with the people like you, Chopper, the forensic media. And I know that I'm going to be the best advocate for this party, the best spokesman for this party, and the best leader not only of this party, but of this country.
You've got a young family. Does Mrs. Cleverly mind? She doesn't mind.
So look,
I mean the scrutiny, you know, all the pressure.
Look, I'm an open book. I'm an open book. I do not pretend to be perfect, but with me, you know what you get. And what I was, what I am, and what I will be is consistent. I don't chop and change. I don't U-turn. I don't flip-flop. If you like it, vote for me. If you don't like it, vote for someone else. But the point is, you know where you stand. All my big decisions, I bounce off of really capable people. I like to surround myself by really serious intellectual people, Mrs. C being preeminent amongst them. And so when I make a decision, I make sure I make it right, and I make it right the first time. And you do that by getting good people around you, listening to their advice, not always agreeing, but always listening, and then deploying. That's what I did when I decided to run for leader. I'm very pleased that my campaign team has attracted some of the most talented people in the Conservative Party. And when I'm leader, that is what I'll do in opposition. And when I'm Prime Minister, that is what I'll do in government. That's how we bring the party together. That's how we deliver for the British people.
What's your biggest regret of all this service you've given this country?
Look, there's loads of regrets. I mean, ultimately, when the party that I am so proud of gets defeated so heavily at a general election, that has got to be right at the forefront of my regrets.
Why didn't you stop that? You're a senior person in the cabinet. Why didn't you say to Rishi Sunak, what on earth are you doing?
Well, look, I think it's well recorded that the Prime Minister made a decision. He went to the palace. He sought His Majesty the King's permission to call an election. And at that point, the die was cast. And from that point, you have a choice. Do you do everything in your power to win the general election? That's what I did. Or do you start perhaps daydreaming about what might be next, doing preparatory work for a leadership bid? That is not what I did. I fought every day to win the election. And look, it's an observation, not a criticism, that I started my campaign to be leader of the party only after I exhausted all my efforts trying to win the general election. I will always be very comfortable. There is no regrets there. I will always be very comfortable with the decisions that I made. And maybe that gave me a bit of a disadvantage, but I've certainly caught up and now I've overtaken the others. I'm very, very pleased that I did the right thing.
So did some of your colleagues in this race start campaigning before the election was lost?
You need to ask them that.
How did your party lose trust?
We slipped into the habit of trying to talk tough rather than delivering. And the big lesson that I take from this general election is that as a party and then as a government, we should promise less but deliver on all our promises. If you do that, you win back the trust of people.
So roll back the state, do less post-COVID pandemic?
Yeah, look,
withdraw from people's lives.
I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm a proud Conservative. We have a fantastic history and tradition as a Conservative party. We don't need to pretend to be something else. We just need to be the better version of ourselves. So when we talk about reducing tax, let's actually reduce tax. When we talk about lifting the burden of regulation, let's actually lift the burden of regulation. When we talk about strong defence, let's spend 3% of GDP on defence. Let's do what we say. And Chris, because if we do that, if we promise less and deliver more, we will regain the trust of the British people. And the place where we need to do that first is in local government, because that is now the only place left where we can prove our professionalism and competence, which is why I'm so focused on us as a party getting our act together so those friends and colleagues who are standing for local government in May of next year have the very, very best chance of getting elected.
So on illegal migration, we've had Jenrick just left the stage. He resigned over the plan. You stayed put. Why is that?
Because I wanted to deliver. I don't run away from problems. I deal with problems.
He resigned. It wasn't going to work. And it didn't work, did it?
It was working. Two
volunteers isn't working,
no,
James.
No, Chris, I put visa changes in place which reduced net migration by 300,000 people a year. I had a plan to make sure that Rwanda worked as a deterrent. And if you will indulge me, this is a bit of detail, but it is important. The Supreme Court, not the ECHR, the UK Supreme Court's argument was that Rwanda was an inherently dangerous place for asylum seekers. So I was sending a small number of asylum seekers to Rwanda so that when the legal challenge came, and it was inevitably going to come, and the Supreme Court once again said Rwanda was inherently unsafe for asylum seekers, I could say, well, that's interesting. Let me introduce you to some asylum seekers who are currently in Rwanda, who are happy and being looked after and being educated and getting medical facilities and given a new and better life. So, explain to me again, Supreme Court judges, why these people, which you claim cannot exist, are there and happy and in Rwanda. Because the last time I checked, opinions of High Court judges don't count for as much as actual facts on the ground. And I was creating those facts, and it would have worked.
So if you had stopped the election, and it's now 1st of October, how many people would be in Rwanda under your policy, looking forward from where you were in the Home Office?
So I reckon at this point we could have sent dozens of people to Rwanda. And the point is...
It's not a lot, is it? It's not...
No, but Chris, you're missing the point. It's not just about the people that we send to Rwanda, because ideally you don't want to be receiving people in the UK and then sending them to Rwanda. You want people to stop coming to the UK. That's the point. And as evidence of how this works, the deal that we had with Albania, the deal that I spoke to Edi Rama, the Prime Minister of Albania, about when I was Foreign Secretary, we didn't need to send very many Albanians back to Albania before the message cut through. Don't waste your time and money trying to get to the UK, because all they do is kick you out again. That's what cut Albanian arrivals by 90%. 90%. And that's what would have happened once we got Rwanda up and running.
Stop the boats was a reason why you lost your election, because it didn't happen. That's a trust issue. Did you try and change or drop that slogan? Well,
look, I inherited that slogan, and the desire that underpinned that slogan was absolutely right. The desire was to stop the boats. That was my plan. And the way I was going about it was to break the business model of the people smugglers, because they are criminal business people. If they can't make money, they won't do it. But look, I get it. Break the business model of the evil people smuggling gangs is not quite as punchy as stop the boats, you know? But that's how it would have worked. That's what we were working on. We were pushing up the price of things like outboard motors, those rubber dinghies. We were arresting them, incarcerating them. We were interrupting their supply of illicit finance. We were making it much more expensive. Rwanda would have depressed demand. That's how you break the business model. That is how you stop the boats and give them more time. That's what I would have continued to work on.
And so it follows, then, you don't think ECHR withdrawal is necessary to make Rwanda work?
It wouldn't have been necessary. And also, the point is, good generals fight the battles on the battleground of their own choosing. Someone who said explicitly they want to destroy our party is demanding that we have this route at this point. And I have no intention of letting some other political party dictate our agenda. I was deporting people every week. I was kicking out foreign national criminals every week. I deprived citizenship of terrorists who sought to do our country harm on a number of occasions. The ECHR didn't stop me because I don't allow the safety of the UK and its citizens to be undermined by anyone, domestic or foreign.
Do you think Labour want you to try and pull out the ECHR at the next election?
Labour would want us to have this row because they know having a row when we should be coming together is counterproductive.
One of your rivals has said that the special forces are killing terrorists rather than capturing them to avoid the ECHR. Is that right or wrong?
Well, look, whoever said that needs to justify their words. I've never accused the British Armed Forces of murdering anybody. No. And if you're going to make that accusation, you need to back it up.
Yeah. On legal migration, you fought 4 elections saying you're going to cut it. You didn't. Have you apologised to these members who went out in your campaign for your land?
So 2 things. We allowed migration, legal migration, over the 14 years to get much, much, much too high, peaking at about £700,000 a year. When I personally was responsible for dealing with migration, so we had 14 years where it wasn't my job to do anything about it. I had 7 months when it was. In that 7 months, I reduced net migration by 300,000 people per year. And that's the point. The point is, I get stuff done. I negotiated with Treasury, I negotiated with the Department of Education, the Department of Health. I changed the visa rules, and the changes that I put in place have reduced net migration by 300,000 people per year. And had I had longer in the job, I would have done more. And that's the point I'm saying. Don't promise, just deliver. And that's what I did.
Is it racist to be worried about immigration?
No, God, no, not at all. And it's the argument of the left that tries to scare us away from doing the right thing on behalf of the country. This country, and I'm incredibly proud of this, this country is open and tolerant and relevant to the world. I look across our party, I look in this auditorium, we have people whose families come from all different parts of the world. I'm the child of migrant families. Or actually, on both sides of my family. My mum came here from Sierra Leone in West Africa in 1966. My dad's family came here from northern France in 1066. So I've got... So I've got migrant stock on both sides of my family tree. And my African family are just as passionate about the integrity of our borders and the integration of people to come and live here just as much as my English family. And both are right. We're a good country, but we do have rules. Play by the rules, that's great. Break the rules, you should expect consequences.
Moving on to tax, are you happy with record tax levels under your government?
No, look, of course not. Of course not. And this is one of the things that cost us dearly at the general election. We said we would cut taxes, and we weren't able to. We didn't cut taxes. Now, COVID distorted everything, but there were opportunities where we could have and should have cut taxes, and we missed those opportunities. So let's not make that mistake again. I am absolutely determined to get us back to being, not just talking about, but being a low-tax Conservative government.
Okay. On your...
Yeah, you can definitely applaud low taxes. You can definitely applaud low taxes.
On your character, you made an inappropriate joke, didn't you?
Yeah.
Last Christmas time, talking about Rehypnol, and it's not really illegal, only a little bit. Why do you say that to people you barely knew, and what does Mrs. Cleverly think of that comment?
Oh, you don't want to hear what Mrs. Cleverly said to me after... if you think that got me in trouble, repeating the words she said to me would get me in an awful lot of trouble, particularly in a live broadcast. Look, I messed up. I messed up. I was trying to make a point that I was the Home Secretary who was updating the law to make spiking illegal, to protect women. I was trying to make that point in front of a number of journalists
who you barely knew about rape. I mean, it's not appropriate.
No, but look, it was the point I was making. I was trying to amplify the point that I was taking action on a really serious issue. I tried to do it in a light-hearted way. It was wrong. It was crass. I apologised at the time, and my real frustration is that in doing that, it undermined the really serious work I was doing. That was totally my fault. But you take it on the chin, you accept the criticism, you recognise that you've done something wrong, and you make good and you make amends. That is what I've done. And as I say, I'm an open book. You know what you're getting with me. But I would make the point that I was the Home Secretary who actually took action, and I have done throughout my political career, to keep women safe.
So looking forward, how do you beat Labour? Do you go after the Lib Dem vote or the Reform vote?
So we've got to recognise that we lost votes to Reform and the Lib Dems, and a whole load of Conservatives stayed at home. And if we want to win, we have to win back voters from Reform and the Lib Dems and those that stay at home. I think about half a dozen people across the country went directly to Labour, but not very many. So we need to demonstrate that we are a proper Conservative party, because Reform is a pale imitation of us. We don't need to be a pale imitation of them. We need to be the best version of us.
Nigel Farage, is he a Tory? Will you allow him in if he stops?
He's not a Tory. He's not a Tory. He never claims to be a Tory. He said he hates the Tories. He wants to destroy our party. He is not one of us. This is my family. This is my clan. These are the people I serve. We need to win back Conservatives, true Conservatives, who've been tempted across to support Reform. I don't blame them. I'm not going to tell them off. We dropped the ball. It is our fault, but it is in our gift to get them back. But we don't do that by making deals with people who say they want to destroy our party.
You used to be a Deputy Mayor of London. What job would you give Boris Johnson in your new team?
Well, I don't know what job he might want. He's a great Conservative. He's a good friend, a fantastic communicator. He was Mayor of London. He won in London, and we need to get back in the habit of doing that for a start. When I first started campaigning with Boris Johnson in 2008, people told me with great authority that I should distance myself from him because being affiliated and associated with him would be a blight on my political career. I didn't listen to them then. I'm proud I didn't, because he was a fantastic Mayor of London. He was a Prime Minister in the most challenging of circumstances with COVID and the war in Ukraine. He made sure our Ukrainian friends had the weapons that they needed to prevent Putin stealing their country. Never forget that. The Ukrainian friends don't, and we shouldn't.
Make him chairman? Make him chairman?
Well, look, I will talk to him at his book launch. I think we've got the invitation to his book launch. I'll talk to him at his book launch. I'll see whether he wants to help get the Conservative Party back into government. I'm quite sure if I'm leader, we're long-standing friends, long-standing colleagues. Maybe I'll persuade him to do us a favour.
Okay. You don't want an elected chairman. You're against that idea, are you? There's been the idea of that is to give these individuals a voice at the top table.
So I will not I will not go down the route of an elected chairman, because your voice at the top table will be me. That's the point.
The NHS, how did you get it to work properly, given you failed over the past 14 years?
Well, the NHS, my mother worked as a midwife in the NHS her whole life. My sons were born in an NHS hospital, same hospital I was born in. Actually, the NHS has saved Susie's life. The NHS is fantastic, but Because I love it so much, I want to make sure it survives into the future and is sustainable. That means we've got to shift the focus and the money towards early diagnosis, screening and prevention rather than keep ill people alive for longer. That does mean reform. It must always be free at the point of use and based on clinical need, because that is the promise to the British people. But beyond that, we need to be thoughtful, we need to be imaginative, we need to make sure it works, because freezing it in amber and not letting it evolve and improve will actually kill the NHS, and none of us should ever want that to happen.
You campaigned for Brexit.
Yep.
It was a good idea, right?
Absolutely, I stand by it. In fact, I was one of the 6 MPs first elected in 2015 that wrote an open letter in the Telegraph saying to David Cameron, who I still respect enormously, even though I don't always agree with him, that he was not asking enough from the European Union, and even if he got everything he asked for, sadly, I would campaign and vote to leave the European Union. Yes, you can applaud that as well. And it's, of course, now very fashionable for everyone to be a Brexiteer, but I was doing it before it was cool.
On the culture wars issue, what value do you place on freedom of speech, and why do the left apparently have a question mark about our past and worry about it so much?
So freedom of speech is something you either respect or don't. What I discovered, actually, is the left like freedom of speech as long as you say what they like you to say. And freedom of speech means nothing if you're not willing to listen to dissenting voices or people that disagree with you. I think it's because they're fragile. I think it's because they know their arguments don't stack up to scrutiny. That's why freedom of speech is really, really important, because if your ideas are not robust enough to stand up to criticism, they are not robust enough to stand up to reality. We lose freedom of speech, we lose everything that our country is built upon, and I will never let that happen.
And the empire, the imperial past of this country, you heard David Lammy in the UN talking about being taken as a black man in chains, his ancestors at the barrel of a gun to be enslaved.
Right, David Lammy David Lammy went to the UN Security Council for a debate about the plight of Ukraine and Ukrainians who are being brutalized by the Russian oppressors and invaders as we speak, and somehow he made it about him. And look, I get it. He's very proud of being the first black foreign secretary.
He's making a point about slavery.
He's trying to talk about David Lammy.
He was shouting at the Russian representative. He was making a point about.
So I went to the UN Security Council. I was at the NATO-Russia Council before Russia invaded Ukraine. I was at the UN Security Council. I spoke at the UN General Assembly. I have criticised the Russian regime to their face. I've called out the Russian Foreign Secretary to his face. He stormed out. I have confronted tyrants and their representatives, and at no point did I feel the need to talk about me. That's not what the job is about.
Okay. I like that. So very quick policy questions. Will you restore hereditary peers to the House of Lords when they're axed by Labour?
Well, look, the House of Lords is this weird institution, but it works. Don't break things that work It works. It's weird. It shouldn't, but it does.
So leave it as it is?
Well, we'll have to see how much damage the Labour Party have done to it. But the point is, don't mess around with things that work. There's plenty of things that Labour Party should be fixing, like, you know, where Keir Starmer gets his clothes and glasses from. Focus on that first. Leave the House of Lords alone. Well,
you mentioned Keir Starmer. Will you refuse all freebies as leader of the opposition? He didn't.
But look, the point is not yes him accepting... No, actually, you know what? I will accept gifts every now and then. Thank you. Is that...
What's the offering? Taylor Swift concert.
The problem is not the accepting of gifts, particularly if those gifts are properly declared. The problem is the stench of hypocrisy, because whilst he was accepting those gifts, he was attacking us for accepting gifts.
Yes or no, will you restore the winter fuel payment to pensioners?
Well, we will have to see how much damage Labour have done. My instinct is to make sure pensioners are protected. There are people in my Essex constituency who are not on the gas grid. They rely on fuel oil. They use the winter fuel payment to pay for the winter's fuel oil. This year they won't get it with no notice, so there is no way that they can make alternative arrangements. They will literally go without heat this winter because Labour lied. Point one. Point two, I fear this is not even the most damaging thing they're going to do to pensioners. So I need to see the collective damage that Labour do before I know what priority it is to put it right. But I will put it right.
Will you scrap Labour's ban on grammar schools?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
But you didn't in 14 years of being in power, did you? But
so I
don't know why that was.
So Graham Brady had a conservative conservative friends of grammar school. I went to a private school, which used to be a grammar school. My uncles went to the school I went to for free as grammar school boys. But by the time I was old enough to go to school, it was a fee-paying school. And because my parents could only afford one set of school fees, I am an only child. Genuinely, that's the sacrifice. That's the sacrifice my parents made to pay for my education. Families should not have to decide family planning based on the cost of educating their children if their children are talented, bright and hardworking. Grammar schools liberate, and we should support liberation.
The top rate of tax, would it go if you were Prime Minister?
So I'm determined to bring down taxes right across the board. And I've already said no one should have to pay more than 50% of any pound that they earn. So short answer, yes. Long answer is I am going to look to bring taxes down in as many different places as possible.
And the BBC licence fee, is that safe under you? Would it change? Would it be
It's going. I tell you, and I said this when I was first elected. I had a delegation from the BBC come along to me and say, when I was a new MP, and they did the usual thing, oh, because of the unique way the BBC is funded. And I said to them at the time, this was back in 2015, I said, if I were you, at the next renegotiation of the licence fee, I would start your planning to be a subscription service. You have a back catalogue of some of the best television in the world. If Disney and Netflix can make money on the subscription model, the BBC should. Because the bottom line is, in the era of streaming services, the tax to watch television is an unsustainable business model. And that back catalogue of content that we have already paid for, why don't we make sure that when China obsesses about Peppa Pig, apparently Peppa Pig is very popular in China, and other content, that they pay for it rather than demanding that we pay for it all over again.
And some very, very quick, lighter ones. Donald Trump or Kamala Harris? Who's your favourite for who you back for?
Look, I have worked with both administrations. I intend to be the leader of the Conservative Party, then Prime Minister. Prime Minister has to work with the people, the person that the US people choose to be their president. That is what I would do, so I'm not going to pick favourites.
Strictly Come Dancing or I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here?
Mrs. C has banned me from Strictly. So I'm going to have to eat kangaroos' testicles.
At home, would you like mowing or hoovering?
Obviously neither, but I know this is a bit of a silly one. I call it vacuum in the garden. So mowing the lawn. Mowing the lawn.
Boris Johnson or David Cameron?
Depends who's paying. So if either of them are going to pay, I'll have a drink with whoever goes to the bar first.
Okay. Which of your colleagues would you like to see in The Traitors on the BBC?
No, they're all great people. They're all great people. They're all wonderful people. By the way, if you go to my merch store, pick up one of the water bottles that says no leaks.
And just for me, a new Royal Yacht Britannia, yes or no?
Yes.
Good, thank
yes,
you.
soft power is fantastic.
That's it.
I've seen it in action. I've seen it in action.
Now, we've got some questions here from members submitted in the hall and also online. John from Bromsgrove asks, as leader of the opposition, briefly, what are your top 5 goals your first 100 days?
So, first of all, appoint a shadow cabinet from right across the political party. No factions, no cliques, no favourites, no little boys' clubs. Point 1. I'm sure, I suspect every single one of the leadership candidates says no parachuted in parliamentary candidates to associations. If we want that to be true, we need to get on with selecting candidates. So we need to select about 300 candidates in 18 months. So the next job is getting on with candidate selection right from the get-go. We do need a big shake-up of CCHQ. I've been party chairman. I know what works. I know what doesn't. I know what needs fixing. That's that one. Secondly, we need to start selling Conservative values again. Every single day, at every single level, town hall, city hall, mayoralty, police and crime commissioners, Holyrood, Cardiff Bay, absolutely everywhere. So getting the whole team together, councillors, police and crime commissioners, MSPs, members of the Senate, all together, whether physically or online, and actually start coming together again as a party. Job 4. And then job 5, stick the boot into Labour.
Stephen from the East Midlands says, how do you propose to bring together the 2 wings of the party? And where are you on those wings?
So the whole point of being a leader that unifies the party is that I can metaphorically put my arm around, the staunchest of cornerstone social conservatives and the most liberal wing of our Conservative Party, because we are all one team. We are all one team. Good generals command from the heart of their army, and my heart is in the heart of the Conservative Party. I have got backers right across the political spectrum within the Conservative Party. People all have a right to say what they believe and have that debate, but ultimately we are one team, we're one clan, we're one family, and we should look to find what unites us rather than what divides us. So that's what I do, and I don't define myself as any part of the party, except after November the 2nd in that leadership position. Okay.
Stephen from Bristol says, Labour's budget, October 30th, is a big deal. If you were leader, how would you respond to it?
Well, the first thing, I think that the new leader should be given the opportunity to respond to it. So I have already said to the party board and the 1922 committee that I would prefer that we nibble away a couple of days from the leadership. And I know that there is a question about whether we deny the members time to vote, but my assumption is that almost everyone would vote online within the first couple of days of the ballot going. Tell me if I'm wrong. Do you think I'm wrong? No, I thought not. So I want to get at them at the first possible opportunity. This budget will define this Labour Party. If we hit them hard, where it hurts, in their economic incompetence, that will be a good starting point for the new leader of the party. I want to get at him.
So next Thursday, if you're on the final two, you'll be seeing Richard Fuller demanding that to happen.
I think when I'm in the final two is the word you're looking for, Chris.
There we are. Okay, good. William from Edinburgh is concerned about NIMBYs. He says that this party relies on a lot of older people to vote for it, because if you saw the election, average age being a Tory is 64 years old now. How will you become the party of house building when so many members are against it in the area?
No, so people in this party who are great protectors of the countryside and great protectors of our wildlife don't say no to building, they say no to building in the wrong place. We can build. This is a fantastic city. Andy Street did a huge job, a really successful job getting homes built in this city, something that Labour completely failed to do in London. We should be building in our cities. We should be making sure that we build beautiful homes that people want to live in for generations and generations to come, not vile, ugly grey tower blocks that need to be ripped down a couple of decades later. Our Georgian ancestors understood the beauty of 3, 4, sometimes 5-story buildings. So we should get back to that. But aesthetics matter. If you build stuff in the right place that looks good, people will say yes. And so we should build. Yeah, we should build. But let's build beautiful, let's build in the right place, and let's build now.
So not on the green belt.
There's no need to go anywhere near the green belt. And I'll give an example. One of the proposals that I put forward, and I'm not giving away everything, but one of the proposals that I put forward is scrapping stamp duty on residential property sales. The reason for that, so the house I grew up in, our next door neighbours, their children moved out 35 years ago. And there are now an empty nester couple living in a 4, possibly even 5-bedroom detached family house. For 35 years, there are 4 unused bedrooms in that house. And they are locked into it because of the cost of stamp duty. If they were able to downsize, they would free up more movement in the housing market. Younger people would be able to get on the housing ladder. There would be much more money pumped through the economy. Because what's the first thing you do when you move? You buy some new white goods, you get the painter decorators in, you get the builders in, you spend money in your local economy. Through our taxes, we have stifled the natural flow of money through the economy. We should remove that tax, pump prime the economy, get that house back in the market.
So remove the tax, scrap stamp duty.
Yeah,
good. VAT on private schools, will you axe that?
Yes.
Thank you. Next one.
Sorry. So, yes, because a tax on aspiration and hard work is perverse, and I'm opposed to it at every level.
Okay. That was Rhoda from Congleton asked that question. Next question. Richard from Warwickshire says, Ed Miliband is not issuing new drilling licenses in the North Sea. Would you reverse that to meet our UK energy needs in an increasingly hostile world?
Yes, and for a number of reasons. Firstly, if we don't secure our energy security, we cannot secure our national security. Point one. Point two, if we don't get it out of the ground in our own territorial waters, we are just going to have to import it from somewhere else. And that is less environmentally sound than doing it domestically. And then it takes me back to the first point I made. It makes us more vulnerable, and I will always prioritise national security.
Ishfaq from Peterborough says that the words of a leader, that be you, can unite or divide this country. As a British-born Muslim, he's fed up of being made to feel like the other. The last government failed, that's your government, failed to give a working definition of Islamophobia, and the recent riots only added to the unease that he, as a British Muslim, faces. How will you unite this country?
Well, the first thing we've got to do is unite around values. And I have friends, I have supporters, I have people that I've campaigned with that come from a range of religions and none. But the thing that unifies us, the thing that brings us together, is the belief that this country is fantastic. A belief that this country has its best days ahead of it, not in the past. A belief that this country will reward the people who love it and work on its behalf and protect itself from people that would do us harm. Those beliefs are not limited to any faith. This party is the party of the nation and the party of family and the party of community. And if we go back to those principles, we can defend everybody, irrespective of their religion, or people with no religion at all. That's the country I recognise, and that's the party that I want us to be.
Does your party have an Islamophobia problem?
Well, I was discussing this with my former Muslim Chancellor friend Sajid Javid.
Well, he might.
And but I hadn't finished yet. I then went on to discuss it with the former chairman of the Conservative Party, Nadeem Sahawi. I haven't finished yet. But you get my point. The point is, this party promotes on merit, irrespective of your colour, irrespective of your gender, irrespective of your age, and I'm incredibly proud of that.
Jane from Stratford-upon-Avon says, now is the time to think the unthinkable and bring back female-only shortlists, because only 1 in 4 of your colleagues in Parliament are women.
So we have got to do more to get women into Parliament, and those women who get into Parliament need to be protected from the abuse that they get. Yes. So Jane, we've never had all women shortlists, and it would be wrong to do so. I once made it very clear. When I think John Bercow, remember him? Yeah. He floated the idea of all ethnic shortlists, and I said at the time, and I wasn't a candidate yet, I was still waiting to be selected or hoping to be selected, I would never apply for an all ethnic shortlist, ever. And the reason the Labour Party have all women shortlists can only be because of one thing. It's because it is a deeply misogynistic political party. Because, and I'll finish on this point, Chris, because then we need to move on, because the only explanation is that either, one of two explanations, either you believe the members of your party will not select a woman on merit, which is a deeply misogynistic point of view, or you believe that they would promote on merit, but no women are good enough. Again, a deeply misogynistic point of view. So the only explanation is it's a sexist political party. We are not. We don't need to do that. Sam
from Yorkshire wants to ask about complex moral issues, particularly the light rightly vote on assisted suicide. Where do you stand on that? And also on abortion, would you change those laws?
So the situation on assisted dying and abortion are separate, and I'll explain both. So on assisted dying, if you want to know where I stand now, look at what I did last time we had a vote on this. I voted against assisted dying, not because I'm religious, because I'm not. It's not a religious point of view, but I know that it is the thin end of the wedge. And I know that people have seen loved ones suffer, and of course it is natural to want to ease their suffering. But we also know that many, particularly older people, hate the idea that they are a burden on their family or their society. And I do not want someone killing themselves or being killed because they feel guilty that they are a burden. They are not a burden. They have been a contributor to society through their life. We owe them a debt of gratitude, not a poison pill. And with regard to abortion, I think the situation that we have works. My view is that abortion, and I know this is not original, I don't pretend it's original at all. Abortion should be legal, safe, and rare.
On foreign affairs, John from Bromsgrove says that assuming both Russia and China are existential threats to this country, should we stop trading with them altogether, with immediate effect, and ban all nationals from those two countries coming here?
Well, I have been Foreign Secretary, and you need to recognise that in circumstances like this, there are really challenging, complicated and nuanced arguments. Russia, however, is a brutalizing, invading state, and we have, through the sanctions, many of which I introduced as Foreign Secretary, withdrawn our trade from Russia, and we are seeking to isolate them economically. I'm very proud that we're doing that. China is a more complicated case. So we do trade with China, as does every other country in the world, including some of our closest allies, the United States of America, Australia, New Zealand, and others. But when I went to Beijing, I sat down with the Chinese foreign minister, I looked him in the eye, and I made it absolutely clear that Chinese molestation of Chinese nationals here in the UK was unacceptable and must not stop. That aggression towards Taiwan is unacceptable and must not happen, and that the Chinese must not, under any circumstances, assist Russia in its brutal war against Ukraine. I flew there directly, looked him in the eye, and made sure he understood in no uncertain terms exactly what the British red lines were on these issues.
On Brexit, Gordon from London says all four of the candidates, including you, voted for Theresa May's disastrous deal, in his words. Why should members who voted for Brexit believe you'll pursue and defend their sovereignty? Well,
as I say, I voted and campaigned for Brexit right from the get-go. I was told that I was ending my political career for doing what I believe to be right. I make no apology for that at all. But I wanted to make sure that Brexit worked. I'm a unionist to my bootstraps, and I wanted to make sure that our friends and colleagues in Northern Ireland, which is just as much a part of the United Kingdom as Braintree in North Essex is, were not disadvantaged in any way at all. And that's, look, it was about breaking an impasse. It was about moving on. It was about looking forward, not backwards. But ultimately, if you want to know my contribution to getting Brexit done, I was the party chairman that worked with Boris Johnson to get an 80-seat majority in 2019, to get Boris in as Prime Minister and to get Brexit done.
On the Middle East, William from Scotland says, should we be a better friend to the political representatives of the Palestinians or the Israelis, and if so, why?
Well, I worked very closely with the representatives of both the occupied Palestinian territories and Israel. I have excellent working relationships with the leadership in Egypt, the leadership in Lebanon, not Hezbollah, but the leadership in Lebanon, the leadership in Jordan, and the leadership of the Gulf countries. It is an incredibly difficult, challenging, and complicated part of the world on some levels, but on other levels, it is really straightforward and simple. Israel has, from the day of its inception, had enemies at every border. Originally state-based enemies, now Iranian-supported militia groups. Israel has a right to exist. That is a red line. Israel has a right and a responsibility to defend its right to exist. That is a red line. My support to Israel is long-standing. I am proud of it. I'm a friend of Israel. I said that directly to President Herzog when I went to see him in the days immediately after the October 7th atrocities. I stand by that pact. I'm proud of that fact.
Would you wear a hoodie saying Hamas are terrorists?
Well, I think it was Margaret Thatcher who said, you don't need to wear a T-shirt to show what your principles are.
There we go. OK. William from Scotland has a question about Ukraine. He's worried that we're being drawn into a conflict which may cost lives, British lives. What's your position on Ukraine? Are we going to stand full square forever by them?
Yes. Yes. And I tell you why. I tell you why. Because when I met President Zelensky in Kyiv, in a building with no lights, buttressed by sandbags, in the depths of winter, whilst Russia was systematically targeting civilian infrastructure, including their power generation facilities, I looked him in the eye and I said, the British people will never abandon you, and I don't break promises.
Some late questions submitted. Susan Hall, AM. You may know her.
Susan.
She asked, what question do you dread the most?
That one. No, look, I have been grilled by political journalists in print and broadcast for many, 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 many years. It's like a trip to the dentist. You don't particularly like it, but you've got to put up with it. And I've practiced it. I like to think I'm fairly good at it. It's not that I always get it right, but it is a byproduct of experience. I am the most experienced person running, and if we're going to hit the ground running from day one, and we must, experience matters, which is why, ladies and gentlemen, you should vote for me.
Is that a dig at some straight-talking candidates you're up against?
No. It's literally me saying I'm the best candidate.
OK, fine. Sally Stubbs from Warrington Leamington, she says that given the press will dig up everything if you become leader, do you have any skeletons in your cupboard you can fess up to now?
No, I blurted out. I don't know why I keep making reference to this. I should try and bury it. But when I went on the John Pienaar show just after I was elected, I blurted out some truths, which are still there. You can Google it if you want. You can Google it if you want. But the point I've said is that I'm an open book. The James Cleverly that was is the James Cleverly now and is the James Cleverly that you will know in the future. Warts and all, you know what you're getting. I'm not going to flip-flop, chop or change. I am me. I know that I am best placed to get us out of opposition back into government. My life is an open book.
Tom from Guildford says, have you ever leaked information to the press? Was it ever justified?
No, and I don't have to answer the second bit of the question.
Okay.
As I say,
what a shame.
Bottles are available on my stand with the word no leaks.
John Davis from Huntington, he asked, do you support capping child allowance at 2 as the number of children is a lifestyle choice, not a taxpayer issue?
So we've got to recognise that we are a generous country that supports people in need. But people also have to have personal responsibility. And every benefit is paid for by someone else. And there are plenty of hard-working families that do the right thing, get up early, help the kids go to school, work long hours, squirrel away every single penny. And I feel really uncomfortable stripping money from them by force to give to people who are not as disciplined as them. That is wrong, and it will not happen.
Eileen Gallagher from Islington North. Yes, exactly. Do you think it's right that LGBT plus groups like Stonewall get unfettered access to schools and other government institutions?
So I said yesterday in an interview, we've got to recognise that adults have a responsibility to children. Children are developing. It's the definition of what being a child is. And we need to make sure we help them develop. Now, I've got very, very, very good friends who are lesbian, who are gay, who are trans, and I am a freedom-loving, live and let live Tory. But we also have to recognise that that children deserve the support of parents. We shouldn't imply that charity groups are inherently seeking to do harm, because generally they are not. But we also need to make sure that we support children as they balance their thought, particularly as they go through puberty. I know it's not quite the question that was asked. I am a little bit uncomfortable, perhaps, where there are permanent, life-changing decisions that are made by children going through puberty. I'm naturally uncomfortable with that. But we should be balanced, we should be thoughtful, we should take our responsibility to children seriously, but we also shouldn't vilify minority groups. And I know that is a little bit more of a nuanced and balanced answer that some might desire, but it happens to be what I believe.
And just finally, Simon from Thornbury says, what lessons can be learned from the Man United's last 10 years since the departure of Alex Ferguson? It's not a good story. Can these lessons ensure the same fate does not befall the Tory party as Manchester United?
So
They have won the league for ages, basically.
I'm an Arsenal fan. Please don't hold me against me. Please don't hold me against me. But what I have learned, and I saw Arsene Wenger, and what I have learned and what Alex Ferguson showed is good organisations with great leaders can do amazing things. Good organisations with the wrong leader massively underperform. Don't pick the wrong leader, pick me.
Okay. They quite like you out there. Okay. James Cleverly, thank you. And that's it. By the middle of next week, people like him, MPs, will have chosen 2 candidates for you to vote on. Best of luck. Make a date for your diaries. GB News is holding the first TV debate or event with them on October the 17th. But as that's it from me. Goodbye.